Welcome to episode 2 of the webinar series, Working on Your Family Business. Today's episode will cover succession planning and how to get started. This webinar is provided by the Ahola Corporation and Ease at Work as part of our unique service offering through our Family Business Employee Assistance Program. This webinar will be 1 hour in length, include a slide presentation, 3 audience participation polls, and a worksheet, which is available for download by visiting the website on your screen. A link to download the webinar worksheet is also available in the reminder email you received today just before the webinar. Throughout the presentation, we also encourage listeners to submit questions to our presenters via the chat function of Zoom. This webinar is being recorded and it will be emailed to all registrants with the presentation slides and the worksheet reference. Now to the introductions. My name is Sonya Ahola, Communication and Brand Strategist for the Ahola Corporation. It's my pleasure to introduce you to our webinar presenters today. Our first presenter is Jeanne Coughlin. Jeanne provides smart business planning that is practical, profitable, and personal. She's a graduate of the Peter Drucker Leader to Leader Institute, is a certified stages of growth strategist and professional behavior and values analyst. Jeanne received the Featured Book Award from the Harvard Working Knowledge Group for her book, The Rise of Women Entrepreneurs, People, Process, and Global Trends. Jeanne is also chair of the Cleveland chapter of WPO, the Women Presidents Organization, a peer advisory group serving women-led multi-million-dollar companies. Thanks for being here, Jeanne.
Thank you, Sonya.
Our second presenter is Linda Bluso. For over 20 years, Linda had a successful legal career as a business and real estate transactional lawyer, representing private and public companies and entrepreneurs. Linda founded Adaptive Knowledge Institute to assist family businesses with leadership transition planning and leadership development. AKI's mission is to be a catalyst, providing individuals and companies relevant knowledge to achieve personal, professional, and business success. Linda received her JD from Cleveland Marshall College of Law and her bachelor's in psychology, magna cum laude from Cleveland State University. Thanks for being here, Linda.
Glad to be here.
All right, let's get started. As you can see, we've got the agenda for the webinar on the screen. We're going to start with asking, what is a succession plan? We'll break down the 3 main components of a succession plan, which are the business plan, the management plan, and the ownership plan. And that will take us into perhaps the most important section of the webinar, how to create a plan to get started. We will have time at the end for questions, so please do submit those as they come up throughout the webinar. Our discussion today will be a combination of how-to, best practices, and real-life application. And with that, I'll turn the webinar over to Jeanne to get started.
Well, thanks, Sonya. I'm excited to pick up on the subject of planning for family businesses after our first webinar. Our goal today is to help you get your arms around the topic of succession planning. I think it's safe to say that it's a topic that's overwhelming for most people. And I think it tends to be overwhelming because it has many layers and dimensions. Succession planning is really several areas of focus that come together under that one broad heading. Today, we're going to break that down and hopefully make it easier to understand, so you can identify the next steps that you need to take in succession planning for your business. This wheel provides the foundation for our webinar today. Succession planning is actually made up of 3 related but separate topics: business planning, management planning, and ownership planning. Because every family business is different, the approach that you use in your succession planning will likely be just a bit different from everyone else. And I think it's important to remember this when you're talking with other business owners and other families. It's really not a one-size-fits-all approach. As Linda and I will discuss today, a business will enter the wheel, so to speak, based on where they're at as an organization and as a family.
Jeanne, it cannot be emphasized enough. Succession planning is not an event. It's a process involving more than estate planning. It's not only about who's going to become owner or owners once the current owner moves on or out. It is about knowing where the business is going, how it's going to be managed, and how are you going to develop the next leaders to ensure an effective transition. The family business is a dynamic asset. It may have employed many family members or not. It has been the lifeblood of a family. When it comes to ownership transitions, the current owner may be surprised to find that there may not be any family members interested in working in or even owning the family business. In those cases, succession planning may require a sale to a third party in order to provide liquidity to not only the business owner, but to heirs. It may involve a sale to employees through an ESOP or a management-led buyout. There are usually choices for a family business owner to consider, and those choices need to be made in a holistic way, considering family needs, business needs, and perhaps even loyalty to non-family employees. A team of professionals is essential to the family business owner so that the owner gains the knowledge to make the most informed decisions about what, and as importantly, how to transition the business. The professional team usually includes attorneys, accountants, insurance experts, lenders, talent development consultants, and business consultants, depending upon the needs of the organization and the family. The key is to consider all aspects of succession planning before setting one aspect in place. Thinking in silos can really create difficulties. I will share a story about this later.
So, as we get started, we wanted to open up our first poll to the audience. Please take a moment to answer. Poll number 1 is, have you started the succession planning process? Yes, no, thinking about it, not sure. Take a few seconds to answer. Linda, how do you think these answers will come in?
I'm guessing it's going to be split between yes and thinking about it.
All right, we'll take a few more seconds to answer. We'll be closing the polls and sharing the results. All right, and it looks like the majority of our participants are thinking about it. Linda, is that how you saw the answers coming in?
Well, I thought based upon what people perceive to be the definition of succession planning, we might have had more yeses, but I'm glad to see that there's 60% that are thinking about it.
Great. And with that, I'll pass it back off to Jeanne to continue with the webinar.
All righty, thanks, Sonya. All right, so let's dive in to the spoke of the wheel called the business plan. When company leaders approach the subject of succession planning, they're often stopped dead in their tracks because they realize if they can't pick a successor or even groom the obvious successor without knowing what qualities they need that leader to have. Excuse me. And you can't determine what qualities you need in a leader until you know where the company is headed and the work that needs to be done. At the very least, the process needs to happen concurrently. So the discussion of who should lead the company and their training and development needs are included in the business planning process. That being said, it's important to start the planning process early, since it can be very messy to transition management to the next generation when you're in the middle of leading a strategic planning process. Unfortunately, there are many tragic stories of a founder dying prematurely and leaving that next generation with no plan for the future. The business plan, or you might refer to it as your strategic plan, needs to be written down and in a format that can be easily understood and implemented. The first webinar that we did in this series actually took you through the creation of a business plan using the CG1 process. And if you don't have a business plan, I would encourage you to check that out. The link to that will be included in the follow-up email from today. The next generation of the family definitely needs to be engaged in the creation of the business plan, but it's also important for that current leader to be involved. If you think of the business plan as the mechanism or vehicle for getting everyone on the same page about where the business is headed, transitioning the leadership of the company to the next generation without a business plan is sort of like handing them the steering wheel to the car and telling them to drive, but not telling them where to go. And creating the business plan doesn't have to be complicated. It's essentially about answering these 5 questions. First of all, why does the company exist? And what are our company and family values? And then what is it that we're building as we look 3 to 5 years out? What do we want this company to look like? How will we build it over time? What are those strategies that we're going to follow? What are the game-changing projects that will take the business to the next level? And then what should we be measuring? The answers to these questions will guide the decisions that follow in relation to who should do what in the company. You may have heard this referred to as having the right people in the right seats on the bus, which is based on a best-selling book by Jim Collins called Good to Great. I can illustrate this idea of the business plan driving the succession plan by sharing a story of how this worked for a manufacturing company. So their strategic planning process revealed the need to expand globally. And the family realized they needed leadership with international experience, and the next generation of family members didn't have any. So they put the family member who was kind of slated to take over into a senior leadership role, but they hired a guy with international experience who was just a few years out from retirement to be the CEO, but also to mentor that son with a plan to transition him into the CEO role 3 years out. You know, I think it's the dream of many family business founders to have the next generation of family succeed them in leadership. It's really an icon of the great American dream. But sometimes that planning process will reveal that it's in the best interest of the family to have a non-family member lead the company. Or as Linda said, even sustain the family wealth by selling the business. So hopefully you can see how the business plan lays the critical foundation for the succession planning process. It creates the clarity that's needed to make crucial decisions for the future of the company, and it will help guide both the talent management plan and the ownership plans, which we'll discuss in the next sections. On the worksheet next to the business plan spoke, I would recommend you consider the following next steps. First, I would start by taking an inventory of existing planning documents to determine what's been done. If your organization has a comprehensive written plan, congratulations, you've completed the first step in succession planning. If there isn't a written plan, schedule a meeting with the leadership team to identify who will be involved in the planning process, being sure all generations are involved. I would also encourage you to identify who will be the lead person internally on your planning initiative. It's also important early on to identify a timeline for the planning process. Once I start working with a client, I find it takes between 4 and 8 weeks to take the team through the process of creating their plans. And since that business plan informs the management plan and the ownership plan, it's important to make this process a priority.
All right, so at this time, we wanted to open up our second poll to the audience. So again, please take a moment to answer. Poll number 2 is, do you have a written business plan? Yes, no, thinking about it, not sure. Take a few seconds to answer. Jeannie, how do you think these answers will come in?
Well, in my experience, we're going to see a lot of no's and thinking about it, but I'm hoping we'll see a lot of yeses.
All right, we'll see how these come in. Take a few more seconds. We're going to be ending the poll and sharing the results. Looks like we've got a pretty good mix across the board. We've got a little bit of everything. Yes, no, thinking about it, not sure. Jeannie, any comments?
Well, I guess it's good we've got folks on the webinar today, and hopefully this will be beneficial for you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so Sonya, now we're going to talk about the next spoke on the wheel in succession planning, which is the management plan. The management plan involves the succession of the CEO and the president, but it should also include other leadership positions in the company, both family and non-family, because they're interrelated. This is about who is running the company, not about ownership, and it's important to be able to separate them. I found that often in family businesses, family members end up in positions by accident. There's a need at the time they join the company, so they step in and fill it. An important goal of the management plan should be to correct that and ensure that as much as possible, people are in roles that align with their strengths and the type of work that they excel at. This part of the plan should include heart-to-heart discussions with family members to understand their personal needs and their interests and what they enjoy doing. This is an opportunity to realign roles on purpose so that family members feel engaged and that their role brings value to the organization. It can be helpful during this phase of creating the management plan to utilize personal assessments, which help evaluate a person's natural strengths and motivators. There are many excellent assessments in the marketplace, and we've listed a few here for your reference. I use a DISC and motivators assessment that evaluates a person's behavioral style or how they like to do things, as well as their motivators, which is why they do things. This insight to a person's style evaluates 4 dimensions, which, if you think about it, have huge ramifications for identifying a person's ideal role in the company. The 4 dimensions are, first of all, how a person likes to solve problems, and then their preference for influencing and communicating with other people, the pace that they prefer, and then how they respond to rules and procedures. The motivators piece of the assessment evaluates what the person is driven by. Are they motivated towards return on investment, or helping others, or continuous learning, as an example? And so, as you can imagine, having this kind of insight on members of the leadership team and family members provides a great foundation for management planning. I saw an example of this in a family business where there were 4 cousins working together. And one of the cousins was acting as the head of finance, but it wasn't his core strength and he really didn't enjoy it. And he'd essentially fallen into that role because they needed a finance guy when he got involved in the business. So in that case, the assessment helped to reveal his strength in the area of marketing. And as a result, they restructured the roles of the leadership team and moved him into a role he was better suited for and frankly happier in. So assessments help to understand the strengths and weaknesses of all the team members, which can provide great insight when you're doing your succession planning. I frequently will include the use of personal assessments in the business planning process to lay the foundation for improving communication and teamwork as that plan is being implemented. Sonya, can you tell us how Ahola uses assessments for training and coaching?
We've used a few, the Colby and the predictive index mainly, which are listed on the screen. I think a lot of family-owned businesses, like your example, were guilty, we were also guilty of placing family members in roles that just needed to be filled, rather than finding the right role for each person's strengths and interests. I think in the past, it was just who was here and who could do the work. But now we're looking at it a little bit more strategically and finding the right fit for people. So having assessments has really set up our leaders for success and put them in the right roles.
That's great. It can make such a difference.
I totally agree. That's great, Sonya, that you've used assessments. Current business surveys reveal that number 1 concern of CEOs is development of the next leaders for leadership transitions. The statistics continue to show that less than 1/3 of family-owned businesses survive the transition from first to second generation, and another 50% of those businesses don't survive from second to third generation. So what's the cause? Why is this? Research has shown some interesting points. The first is the current generation lacks the skills or timing tools to transition leadership. Second cause is the upcoming generation of leaders are not prepared to transition or lead. A third cause is the business model is stagnant and the competition is surging ahead. And the fourth is finally the owner can't, won't, or doesn't know how to move on and make the transition. I tell my clients, do you want to control your destiny or do you want to be controlled? Family businesses were started by entrepreneurs, usually because they didn't want to be controlled. They had a better idea or didn't want to work for someone else. It is this feeling of being in control of one's destiny versus working for another that drives entrepreneurs. So on this point about control, I find it really ironic that family businesses fall behind in being proactive in planning for the succession or transition. You would think that the need to be in control would drive more family businesses to do this kind of planning. Having a management plan to execute on the business plan is important. Equally important is to have a leadership development and transition plan. A leadership development and transition plan addresses the how am I going to transition and develop the next leader. Alignment of leadership competencies to the organization's needs can be done with the assessments as Jeanne mentioned. Assessments allow customization of a leadership development plan. I would also add that coaching next leaders is another valuable tool in leadership development. The advantages of having a coach include they bring an expertise in leadership development and planning, such as bringing communication, strategic, and critical thinking tools to the table. They can help drive accountability. Coaches can offer fresh insights and ideas. And especially in a family business, the coach can address ticklish topics that a parent or a non-family supervisor would feel uncomfortable doing. Coaches bring objectivity and become a confidant for the next leader. Finally, a coach can really save the owner time and burden of feeling that he or she has to train someone. On the worksheet, under management plan, as a first step in getting started, my recommendation would be assessing what have you done, what are you doing, and obtain the assistance of consultants to determine what may be needed to really prepare the future leaders. Another recommendation to help you get started is establishing a deadline in doing this task so you are committed to a time frame to begin.
All right, so at this time, we wanted to open up our third and final poll to the audience. So again, please take a few moments to answer. Poll number 3 is, how are you developing the next generation of leaders at your company? So this is a multiple choice, so go ahead and select all that apply to you. So we've got a lot of options here. We've got outside seminars and conferences, formal mentoring, so that could be a monthly standing meeting with an owner or CEO. Informal mentoring, so maybe a ride along to a client. The use of assessment tools like some of the ones that we mentioned. Coaching by outside consultants, and lastly, formal university education. This could be an undergraduate or an MBA. Linda, how do you think these will come in?
I think they'll be really heavy in informal mentoring by the owner or CEO, and then maybe outside seminars and conferences.
All right, we'll take a few moments. Please finish answering. We'll go ahead and end the poll and share the results. Wow, we have a huge majority using informal mentoring by an owner or CEO. Linda, what are your thoughts on that?
I think I'll buy a lottery ticket.
All right, great.
Okay. On the worksheet, the last plan we will be discussing is the ownership plan. When we talk about ownership and governance structures, we can break it down into elements in a family business. There's the legal structure, and then there's the family business governance structures. Both are intended to create a legacy, yet they address different aspects of business and family business dynamics. Legal structure means how do you deal with ownership and control? Shares, share classes such as voting, non-voting. And then for control, you have officers, directors, and meetings as prescribed by the Code of Regulations or Operating Agreement. Examples of documents which prescribe and memorialize the structure adopted would include articles of incorporation or organization, bylaws, Code of Regulations, and buy-sell agreements. There are lots of family businesses who do not have the requisite legal structure in place or in some cases, there may be the legal structure, but it is not properly documented, or through custom and practice over the years, there's been a deviation from the original structure. Early generation family businesses often forego having a board, for example. This is a huge missed opportunity. A board of directors is a fiduciary board, meaning the directors are bound to act as fiduciaries and in the best interests of the company. An advisory board is a non-fiduciary, non-binding board, but provides guidance to the CEO. In either case, it is of benefit for a business to have a board of directors or a board of advisors. To further that point, there is also benefit in having independent, non-family persons serving on boards. They provide fresh insights and perspectives to business issues. They can be objective and be the voice of reason. Family business governance structures foster a legacy, but in a different way. Family business governance structures can include a family constitution. This is a written document that is foundational to the family's commitment to the family business. It can include such things as why the business was founded, what the business stands for, and aspirational goals. Sometimes family businesses write a family values statement either in place of or in addition to a family constitution. Family policies are rules that the family has adopted to deal with family dynamics affecting the business. Examples would include policies around compensation of family members' eligibility to work in the family business, and vacation time, along with other benefit policies. Family councils are organized to address family issues which may affect the family business. I like using this tool with my clients because the managing family members have a forum to take their family and personal issues with each other too that otherwise would negatively impact the family business if it were discussed in the business hallways or in the boardroom. When I help a client establish a family council, we put some formality and process around it, allowing conflict to be managed in a safe and productive way. Family assemblies are used to inform the larger family about the business. By larger family, I mean married-ins, non-family family members who own shares but are not working in the business. Family meetings are used to communicate and educate family members about the business. These structures are very personal and customized to a family's needs. What can happen if you don't look at all the aspects of succession planning? Well, the story I wanted to share with you that I mentioned earlier, I had a client that focused on an ownership plan through an estate plan. And years passed, and then two sons joined the business. One was made president and the other was made a vice president. The father remained CEO, but according to the son who was president, he meddled in the day-to-day operations, which undermined the president. There was friction among all of them. The president resented his authority being undermined. The other brother was put in the middle between the father and his brother. There were no written job descriptions or conflict management policies in place. The father confided that had he known how this situation would have evolved, he would have given more thought and consideration to management and leadership planning rather than just address an ownership plan, which admittedly was driven by tax considerations. One of the ways we dealt with this situation was by establishing a family council. The lesson here is before setting the ownership plan in place, some consideration should be given to the management and leadership of the business. Being singularly focused can create unnecessary challenges that can impact effective succession planning. The advantage of using these legal and family governance tools is that it helps with smoother management. It minimizes conflict, so family issues can stay with the family and the business can be run more professionally. So in getting started on the ownership plan, I would recommend that you begin by taking an audit of what legal documents you have. Are they reflective of how the business is operating? What changes are needed for the future? Discussion with the family members is also a good step. Then having your attorney update the documents or create whatever documentation is needed could be your third step. As for the family governance structures, which ones do you have and which ones do you need? That can be a discussion among family members and with a family business consultant. Don't delay this review or this discussion. It can save you lots of time, expense, worry, and unnecessary conflict. Okay, so we've made it through the 3 components of a succession plan, and hopefully you've captured some good ideas on your worksheet. We know from research, less than 1/3 of family-owned businesses survive the transition from first to second generation, and another 50% of those businesses don't survive from second to third generation. And we shared the causes of these failures. Our goal today was to share an easy-to-understand overview of the 3 elements of effective succession planning so that hopefully the process of getting started will be less complicated, less intimidating, and create successful transitions for all of you. And now I'd like to turn it over to Sonya to take some questions from the audience.
All right, great. So like we stated before, please go ahead and submit questions that we'll go ahead and answer with our presenters today. We'll spend about the next 10 to 15 minutes wrapping up with questions, and then we'll wrap up the webinar. All right, so it looks like we've got one coming in now, so we'll do this one first. All right, what do you do if the older generation isn't comfortable leading this process? So a strategic planning process or a succession planning process. So Jeannie, why don't I give you this one?
Okay, Sonya. It's interesting. I often hear from the founding family members that they don't want to lead the planning process because they're concerned that the next generation has buy-in and ownership to the plan. And while that is vital to the success of the plan being implemented, it's important, I really feel strongly that the existing generation of leaders are involved in this planning process. If you think about it, they bring the history and they bring the legacy of the family, and so their involvement is really critical.
Right.
It's true, though, that the next generation of leaders, including non-family members, may be better experienced or inclined to lead the process. And I think that's just fine. Identifying who should lead the process internally is really a very personalized decision. There's no right or wrong answer, and I think it'll vary from one company to the next.
Right.
How did you guys approach this? Because I know you had several family members involved in this planning process.
Yeah, so we have 3 generations of family, and I think, like you said, traditionally that leadership, the generation that's within the leadership team really led that process, but they were really adamant that they wanted my generation of family to be involved. So we had offsite meetings. It was a long process. It wasn't a one-time meeting, one and done. We're still living succession planning every day.
Mm-hmm.
But the family made sure they wanted the opinions of the 3rd generation because they wanted them to feel engaged and take ownership of what we were doing.
Yeah,
so that worked well for us.
That's great. It's really important to have that balance.
Right.
Right.
All right, a couple more questions. So, again, feel free to submit those using the question function of Zoom. So we'll do this one. So I have 2 children in the business who desire to be the next leader. How can I choose one child over another to lead the company? Linda, you want to take this one?
Sure. Well, this can be one of the most difficult decisions a parent owner faces with respect to leadership transition. I think what's helpful to keep in mind is objectivity. The decision should be about who is the better leader for the business and not necessarily rewarding the older child just because they are first in line or started in the business first. This should not be viewed as a monarchy. It's a business, so you need to create a business plan, as Jeannie outlined in this webinar, identify the leadership competencies for the business in order for the business to be successful in the future. And then the use of assessment tools and coaching would be very helpful in then determining who ends up becoming, adapting to the competencies, in adopting the kind of competencies they need to develop. So using a consultant can really help give cover to the parent owner in establishing a process to ensure objectivity, which is in the best interest of the company and the family, And then the findings of the third-party consultant experienced in this process can help mediate the conflict about the decision. So it can really help the family's acceptance of the results.
I think that objectivity is really important, because I think, so many business owners, us included, it's so personal. Family and business are so closely tied that having that third party that's using, science, and, they're really looking at things strategically. It's not personal. It's about who has the skills to be the best fit. I think that's a really important piece of what you were saying.
Right. The objectivity of the decision, but also the objectivity of a process is so you have to have a process.
All right, a couple more questions. We'll take a few more. All right, we'll do this one. How do you keep family members and your management accountable during this process? How long does it take? Jeanne, you want to take this one?
Okay. Well, this is a tough one in a way, Sonya, because as we've been talking today, this process has many layers. It's really like peeling an onion, if you want to think about it that way. And usually companies are trying to do succession planning while not usually, they are always doing succession planning while they're still running the company. And there's usually not one person whose job it is to wake up in the morning and, be in charge of this. So I hear this is probably the biggest frustration in the process from companies that I work with. And, as simple as it sounds, one of the best practices in this area is identifying a schedule for consistent meetings. And I find that you need at least a monthly meeting rhythm. And clearly, if you think about meetings, we all have bad experiences with ineffective meetings. But sometimes just the sheer fact of bringing everybody together once a month highlights the fact that, oh gosh, guys, we're still working on this. We need to make progress. And it's really important that everybody's committed to attending. You can't have that, important meeting came up. I mean, really, this needs to be a number one priority. And not surprisingly, you need a predetermined agenda, and you need that meeting rhythm, and that brings a discipline to the process. And as we mentioned before, this is an area where outside consultants can help. They can help create the agenda, actually facilitate those meetings, and keep the leadership focused on the next steps and outcome. As Linda said, they really bring that accountability to the team and that focus.
Great. All right, we have another question. What is the cost of turning a business over? Or what is the process in determining said cost? Linda, do you want to take a stab at this one?
Sure. I think it just, having been a lawyer and giving legal opinions, usually we say it depends. And I would say in this, to answer your question, I think it depends on what is needed. It's a very, as we say, we've got, 3 elements of an effective succession plan. So it just depends on where the company is at in its planning process. It depends on where they're at in developing a management plan and leadership transition plan, and also about the ownership structure. So cost, you would have to determine what consultants you're going to need first, to basically, for example, if you need an attorney to do some documents, you're going to have to get a price for that. If you need an insurance expert because you need to buy some insurance in order to, as part of your succession planning, you're going to need to know what that cost is. So, you can create a list of the things that you're going to need and the consultants that you're going to need, and then you determine your cost from there. Business consultants can charge in many different ways. They can charge anything from an hourly to a retainer to a project fee. But then, when you do project fees, you got to know exactly the scope of the project. So I don't know, Jeanne, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, well, I empathize with the person who asked this question, because I think, again, when we talk about succession planning, at times being overwhelming, and I do think this investment is part of that for the family business. And so, I guess it's, if you look at it as an investment in the future of the business versus, a cost or spending, that can help. And I do think it goes back to where we started with this, that you really want to start early, because if you start early and you're taking, deliberate time and not being rushed, it enables you to kind of spread it out over time, spread out that cost, and make smart decisions. And, webinars like today are a great way to educate yourself so that when you do get to the point of engaging consultants and professional service providers, you're prepared and you're not sort of, running through their billable hours.
Great. All right, we have about time for one last question. So this is a short one. When should I start? When should I start succession planning? How do I get started? Ladies, do you want to take this one, Linda? Kick it off.
Sure. To tag on to what Jeannie just said, remember, transitions are inevitable, and unplanned for transitions can really pull a business up in the air, such as an owner becomes ill, disabled, or unexpectedly dies. So I'm on the start as early as possible bandwagon, so you can identify issues, have time to reflect, have time to have discussions, have time to reflect again, avoid crisis, and those untimely transitions. So I would say put it on your calendar, treat it like an event that you have to do. Again, it's a process, not an event, but to put it on your calendar, you at least see it and you've got to do it.
Jeannie, any thoughts?
Yeah, I just echoing that idea that we all think, tomorrow is so far away, and it's really, there's not, too soon is not, the case in terms of starting succession planning. In fact, I've heard people say once you start your business, you should also be thinking succession planning. And I think that's true.
And I think, webinars like today, we wanted to make it so that there are some true takeaways with the worksheet and, the comments that we spoke on. So we'll be sending the reporting out. But, I think reflecting back on those tips on how to get started is a great way to kind of tiptoe into each of those areas if you're not starting in each of those areas. And like we said at the beginning of the webinar, this is going to be unique for every business. So it's not a one-size-fits-all approach where, if you have a friend that owns a business and they're working on this and you're, just learning from them, it may not be, that might not be what your company needs. So it's going to be unique to everyone. But like Linda and Jeannie said, just get started, put it on the calendar, and start the discussion. I think that's the most important. All right. Well, that's going to wrap up the webinar for us. I want to thank you for joining us. Jeannie, Linda, thank you for being here.
Thank you, Sonya.
It was great. Thank you.
The webinar and its contents will be sent to all registrants, and you can have affordable access to these consultants that we spoke with today, as well as other family business services that we discussed in today's webinar through Ahola's Family Business EAP. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you again soon.